Good morning. How are you?
Can you hear us better?
I can hear you great.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine.
Excellent.
This is a cool new, whatever it's mode to do this conference.
Yes, I'm using my very fancy iPad in my spare room at my house. So yes, it's very fancy.
Very cool. Nick, today we've got Gavin again. You've talked with him before.
Yep.
And this is Kira. Hello.
And Kira.
Hello.
We are well aware that session has ended. So we have some questions about sort of what went on and how you feel about how things went. And,
Okay.
So I'm going to turn it over to them, and we may have questions from the audience. But
Super.
Cool.
Fire away.
So can you tell us about the new, hold on, I messed that up. Let me restart that. Can you tell us about the new, hold on, I'm gonna make it look like I'm talking to you, but I'm actually reading the notes.
It's all good. No worries.
Can you tell us about the new Washington automatic voter registration law and why
Sure.
were some people against it?
Some people were against it because there's some folks that feel that the easier it is to register to vote, that the easier it is for people to fraudulently vote. That that there's some group of people out there, whether they're illegal immigrants or whether they're people gaming the system or whatever, that are going to figure out how to register to vote in a way that is that's illegal or inappropriate or what have you, and that the easier that you make it to sign up, then there's fewer checks on making sure that stuff is done appropriately. I personally think that's a ridiculous argument. That the easier it is to vote, guess what? The more people vote, the more people participate, the less barriers there are. But to be honest, some people like barriers to people being able to vote. If I keep you guys from voting, then my vote counts more, right? And so I think a lot of it is that sort of political gamesmanship, if you will, which I understand. I mean, it's about winning, but I don't think that it's an authentic concern. I mean, there's literally never, I would say never, there have been very few cases ever documented of voter fraud, certainly on any type of a broad scale. And the automatic voter registration stuff that they put in place has all sorts of checks and balances on it, so that even though you get to register that day and vote that day, they check it all out the same way they would if you had registered 60 days ahead of time, because there's a period during which they're counting votes where they're able to verify your identity, et cetera, and make sure that you're not some Russian bot voting or something, right? Because that's a concern, right? This whole bot hacking of Facebook and of the attempts by the Russians to hack election systems could have huge implications, and so they want to be careful about that. So on a principle basis, I get that folks want to be very careful and make sure every box is checked and every safeguard is followed. But in the end, I think that that's sometimes a hiding behind that, and the reality is they just want, hey, I'm already registered to vote. I don't need you guys to be able to vote. I get my way if easier if you guys don't. That's maybe not very nice of me, but that's my sort of cynical take on things. Hey, this is pretty cool. The light on the ceiling gives me like a halo while I talk to you guys. That kind of rocks.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't even notice that.
What wisdom can I provide you, Gavin and Kira? No, sorry. Sorry, I lose all professionalism after the session ends. I did wear my nicest hoodie for you, though, Gavin.
I did too. It's okay.
So,
Rockin'.
do you know anything about the effects of the student walkout last week?
Effects in what way? I think it was something that, did you guys do it?
I don't know, but
I was at work.
You were at work?
yeah, we were at Hamilton. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Lucky
Yeah, we
suckers.
were just curious, like if you heard any rumblings.
Yeah, there's a lot of different opinions about it. One is kids should be in school and they should be suspended if they're going to walk out of school, and others who feel that it was a very positive moment for people of your generation to be able to say, hey, we're getting shot in school, want to raise the awareness of what's happening. And hey, guess what? It worked. People were agitated about it. Now, some of them were agitated in a negative way. Some of them were agitated in a positive way. Some of them were just agitated in a way that made them pay more attention. But to me, even if people get angry, that means they're paying attention, and it's having an effect. So I think it's very positive. And my family and I are going to participate in the walk tomorrow. I got a almost 2-year-old, and I would, and my wife and I were talking about it last night, and she's been looking at bulletproof backpacks, for for when she for when Olivia goes to preschool. I mean, that's insane. But the fact that that's a rational concern for parents kind of says something. So we're going to participate in the march tomorrow that is led by some of your peers at other parts of the state, and that I think are very positive, because it's about making change. And for us as adults, we've screwed things up. We are not the ones that are going to be able to fix it. You guys are the ones that are going to be able to fix it, not just this, but a lot of other stuff. So when folks your age say, hey, we have a very clear need or desire for things to change in a fashion that directly impacts us, well, as a parent and as an adult, I think it's my duty to back you up on that. Not you, but those guys.
Yeah.
And those of you who agree with that.
For sure. Question number 3. What bills have passed the session that surprised you?
Bills that surprised me this year. I'm hard to surprise, but I guess the thing that surprised me the most was, and it's a lot of inside baseball around it, but there's this initiative about use of force by police, that Washington has the toughest law in the country for holding police officers accountable if they shoot someone. So it was really pushed by, I don't know if you guys remember, a couple years ago, there was a Native American homeless man, wood carver, John Williams, who was literally just sort of crossing the street. And he had some mental health issues and some chemical dependency issues. And so he had his wood carving knife in his hand, and the cops considered him a threat and gunned him down. What should be the accountability for those police? Well, Washington's law says that you have to have malice, which means you have to be wanting to negatively impact that your desire is to harm, right? And any police officer can say, no, I didn't mean to harm him. I was trying to, wing him. I was trying to, eliminate the threat, all of which is true. They got tough jobs, right? And who knows that guy with the knife talking to himself wasn't going to charge him. But it was a particularly egregious case. And there have been a number of those around the state and around the country, obviously. And so how do you hold police accountable for when they shoot someone and they say, hey, it was self-defense, or hey, I'm a trained professional, I know what I was doing, and that's why I shot him? Well, unless they had, malice or hate in their heart when they pulled that trigger, you can't find them guilty, and so unless you can prove that. So there actually was a law so people collected initiative signatures, initiative 740, I think the number is, and sent it to the legislature to act on it. Everybody just assumed it wasn't going to get acted on, because that's a hot potato if ever there was one, right? You want to talk about, hey, here's a good cop and here's a bad cop. Well, who the heck am I to make that decision, right? But the legislature ended up enacting a compromise, and I was really, really shocked that police on one side and victim advocates on the other were able to come together and pass a bill that passed the initiative that was sent to the legislature, so that it doesn't go to the people. And then they passed a bill that had some compromise changes to it in addition to passing the initiative. Sorry, it's sort of inside baseball, but long story short, huge compromise, and a lot of great work went into that to be able to get, shooters and shootees on the same page, right? Where for years, if not decades, it hadn't happened. But with Black Lives Matter, being, casting a real spotlight on this, it was something that was going to get action either by the voters or by the legislature, and so the compromise came together. So that really surprised me because it was really a hot potato, and I didn't think that would happen. Sorry, that was a really long and probably boring example of, but it's one of those things that when people come together, they're able to get things done. Now, Tim Eyman, who never seen a law he doesn't want to overturn, is questioning the constitutionality of the way that the legislature did it, and they may have not followed the proper process, and blah blah blah. So it'll be interesting to see if it's upheld or not. But again, to me, the outcome, if you can find a compromise outcome, that's better than one side or the other just getting its way. Unless it's me, because I like to get my way.
I do too.
That was awesome.
When can citizens and lawmakers start working on new laws?
Today, now, right? You could right now say, hey, Nick, I've had this idea and this needs to change. And I would say, hey, that's super, Kara. Let's work on that right here, right now. And we could talk about that. And then we'd set up an appointment with one of your legislators to try to talk about turning it into a law, and we'd get to work on that. So, legislature, has been nose to the grindstone and not seeing their families a lot for the last couple months, but they've had a couple weeks off, right? So they're starting to re-engage in a number of ways, particularly given that they're running for office. So this is something that's an important dynamic to know, right? When they're in Olympia, they're hard to get to, and they're hard to talk to, and they're hard to persuade, right? Because they're moving very fast, as you guys saw this year. So it's hard for me to get in to see them. It's hard for me to pitch something to them. But right now, so in Olympia, we are trying to get their votes on our bills, right? Right now, they're all running for re-election, right? So they're looking for your votes. So when you come to them with an idea, they have even more incentive. Not that they wouldn't otherwise, right? But they're particularly open to what their constituents want right now, because they're going to be starting in the next month or so to really gear up for running for re-election. When they're in that type of circumstance, they're willing to spend the time, and they're willing to be open in ways that they aren't otherwise. You can sit down with them at Zips for an hour, right? Instead of being able, instead of having 5 minutes to try to grab them in the hallway, right? And you can talk to them about what your priorities are. And answer questions, et cetera, and get to know them better, and them to get to know you better. And then they say, well, that Kira, she had a great idea. That Gavin, he's a spaz. But, Kira, she was speaking from her heart. She really seemed to understand what she was talking about. I sympathize with her. Her teacher had her back, and so it's already had some adult supervision. So sure, let's work on that, and let's do this for somebody in my community because it's the right thing to do, and because it's something that someone from my community thought was important. So literally, that's what I always advise people to do, and what I try to organize clients to do over the summer is I hop in my car and go around this state and meet with legislators in their home offices, or in their local offices, or at Starbucks, or where have you, and just talk to them about, hey, what's on your mind that I should care about? Hey, here's what's on my mind that I think you should care about. And they tell me I'm full of it, and then I go back to the drawing board, or they tell me something and I think they're full of it, and I tell them exceedingly politely that I think that's maybe not the best idea or whatever. And so out of that, we go back and forth, and we have months then to work on something to take it from just a wild idea and make it into something that's honed down to a fine point that we can get done in the legislative process. And that's something that I really think is important. Is far too few people, I think, take advantage of the openness of their elected officials, because they got representative in their title and everything, right? They're representing you, and so they want to do the best job they can. And so if you as a class, if you as a group, if you individually want to push something this is the time to start doing that. And they may not be taking meetings until June or something because they're going on vacation after session or want to spend time with their family, or I don't know, have to do their actual job that pays, unlike the legislature. The legislature pays, but not so great. It's worse than, they get paid worse than teachers. You know, but it's always a good time to reach out to legislators to try to get them to hear where you're coming from. Sorry, typical long answer to easy question.
Yeah.
It's okay. So if something happens when they're not in session, will like nothing happen next year? Or will nothing happen until next year?
It depends. It depends on who has the authority to do that. Let's say, I don't want to jinx us, but let's say there's some horrible economic crisis, right? And the bottom falls out of the economy and all of a sudden money isn't coming in. They've passed laws that say they're going to do certain things that cost a certain amount of money. If they don't have that amount of money, then they have to come back into session to fix that, to either come up with the money or cut their promises that they made in the budget. So that's something that they would have to come back for. The governor's office or the governor and the agencies that he administers have a lot of authority to decide on what they're going to do. Think of it as the legislature being the school board and the governor being the principal, right? So, you know, if something happens between, you know, if the toilets overflow at Mead Alternative and the principal isn't going to wait for the school board to tell him he can spend the money, is going to spend the money, right? And then trying to figure out where that comes from, you know, over the long term later. Same type of thing. If there's wildfires, right? There's, you know, you guys suffer from that over there, I know, and Central Washington even more so. So the Department of Natural Resources is sort of authorized to go out and fight fires, even if they haven't been officially authorized to, you know, every dollar and cent around that. And so, and then with the legislature, and that's pretty rare that they get that type of authority, but there's that authority for them to deal with stuff as it comes up. And that's part of the reason for the state agencies to always be very vigilant about stuff, is that they need to be on top of making those types of decisions on the fly where needed. Does that make sense? But to get authorization for like something completely new, they have to wait for the legislature to come in, unless it's something that the governor clearly has the authority to do.
So, did you get anything passed or not passed that you worked on hard this session?
I got most of my stuff passed. I'm a very, very, very happy camper. Thanks, I appreciate it. You know, you want to know about specific things that I'm jazzed about?
Yeah.
Or was it a yes/no question? Yes, I got
The end.
the end. I don't give short answers. Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about three things. One is, and some of these I may have already talked to you about it. You may think they're boring as hell, but I'm really excited about them. Because one of them I've been working on for 6 years, one of them I've been working on for 10 years, and one of them I've been working on for 18 years, right?
Oh my gosh.
So, right? So it takes a long time. You got to be stubborn SOB like me to be able to stay the course on that, right?
Wow.
So one of them was school breakfast. We just put in place a requirement. Thank you. Called breakfast
last year. Yeah.
Breakfast after the bell. That's right. We talked about that a lot last year. And it basically says if you have a lot of low-income students in your school, you can't just cut off breakfast when the bell rings. You have to give kids options to eat after the bell rings, right? Whether you get a pass to go down to the cafeteria, or whether you you bring a cart around, or what have you, right? Doesn't seem that difficult, but there was a lot of schools who said we don't have the money to do that. We'd have to pay the lunch lady longer hours. We'd have to pay, invest more money in something to keep stuff warm, et cetera, et cetera. So we had to make it clear that not only did they have the authority to do that, that they actually had to do that. So if a school has 70% or more of its kids are on free and reduced lunch programs, then they have to do that starting not this upcoming school year, but the following school year, give them some time to get up and running. I mean, it's sort of common sense. I mean, but, you know, we heard from folks that said, well, we have a childhood obesity epidemic. We don't want to give kids, you know, maybe they already had breakfast at home. We're going to give them a second breakfast. Now we're going to have fatter kids.
Wow, brutal.
Right? Never underestimate the ability of people to find a reason not to do something that they don't want to do, right? And a lot of other people just thought it wasn't the school's job to feed kids. That's a parent's job. Well, what if there's not a parent? What if there's not a functioning parent? What if there's not, you know, I mean, come on, right? I think a lot of it was just, you know, wanting to limit what government does and doesn't do, and frankly, a lack of experience in many cases about what it's like to go hungry and, you know.
Or teach hungry kids, yeah.
Or teach hungry kids, exactly. So that was a big one, and I'm super excited that we got that passed finally.
Yeah,
And, I mean, hello, feeding hungry first graders. I mean, and it took 6 years to get that passed. So when it took 10 years to pass is sometimes, you know, people have like retirement benefits or disability benefits or housing vouchers or stuff like that, that are the way that they pay for housing, right? To get a roof over their heads. Well, there was nothing there were a lot of landlords, not a lot of landlords. Some landlords would say, we don't want those people living here, right? You know, those are difficult folks. They're going to trash my units. They're poor. They don't know how to live, you know, live civilized lives, etc. So we're just not going to, if you have a voucher, you know, and literally my favorite was once seeing a Craigslist ad that said, pets welcome, no Section 8, right?
Wow.
So you take Pomeranians, but you won't take people, right? Which I just find morally reprehensible. So we passed a law, and again, it's been 8 years, I guess, in the making, that says you don't get to decide that this person because they're on SSI, or this person because they're on veterans benefits, or that person because they're on a voucher is less than the person who can pay out of their own pocket. You have to consider all income sources equally and not discriminate. Oh, weeping and wailing, we're going to end the capitalist system as you know it, and landlords were going to go out of business. So we came up with $3 million to bribe them. I'm sorry. $3 million to provide them with an incentive so that if they're right, if folks on vouchers do trash their units, then there's an insurance fund to pay them for that damage. Now, there's a bunch of other states that have done this. You know, I wish I could say I was the genius that came up with this idea. But there's a bunch of other states, particularly Oregon, that did it. And guess what? Very few people use that fund because poor people aren't harder on the units. You know what? Somebody who's been living in their car treats an apartment like it's the Taj Mahal, right? They're not going to trash it. So you know, so we've offered them $3 million, you know, a year to be able to fix up any units that poor people trash. And I think that's $3 million at some point that we'll have to spend on something else, because it'll be shown that, guess what? Poor people are just people with less money in their pockets and need to be treated equally, and that could get on a self-sufficiency trajectory so they don't have to depend on these other sources of money in the long term, hopefully. So that was another bill that I was super excited about passing. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then the last one was we've been having, you know, like when somebody buys a house, we've had a little fee of $68 that people pay when they buy a house, right? So you're buying a $500,000 house, or heck, even a $250,000 house, you pay $68, you know, and that goes to fund homelessness services around the state. Well, people were saying, well, that's an impediment to being able to afford a home. Hello, my house cost $435,000, and I'm sorry, now it costs $435,000 and $68. That is not a big thing, and I can afford to pay it to help people who can't afford to even put a roof over their heads. So those fees had been temporary, and you know, and we had to keep getting them reauthorized. So we were to make those fees permanent so that people know that the money's going to be there for them. And we got them increased by $25, including to fund that $3 million for the landlords. So we got $26 million more a year for homeless services made permanent, about $60 million in funding that now people can depend on, rather than thinking it's going to go away next year or 5 years from now. So that was that. And again, I've been working on that since, Jesus, since you guys weren't even born, probably, to think about it.
Yeah,
so I worked on it first in 2001.
I was dead then.
You were dead then?
Yes, we're alive.
Well,
If you're not alive, you're dead.
maybe like one.
You had kinetic potential, Gavin. So those are the big things. I mean, so those are just 3 examples of things that I'm super psyched that we, and again, that I've worked on for a lot of years and spent a lot of blood, sweat, and tears on, that we were able to get done this year. So I'm very proud of those. Thanks for letting me brag a little bit.
Congratulations.
You guys are very sweet. Thank you.
All right. Well, Nick, I think this is our last session, if I'm correct. So we, of course, want to thank you. And we have a little thing that we do here that I don't think we did it this year. So I want to do it now.
Okay.
Just humor me for just like 30 seconds.
All righty.
All right. So can you
This
guys-
hurts.
Kieran and Gavin look really, really excited about
Okay, fine. They know what we're going to do. Okay. Go join your classmates, please. Okay. Okay. Let me make sure I can see them here. Okay. So here's our group.
it. There we go.
All right. Everybody say hi first.
Hey, guys.
All right, so this is our thank you, and we hope to see you again next year and have a wonderful break. Send off.
Thank
Who's
you.
gonna do it?
Gavin got it.
Okay, everybody ready?
1, 2, 3.
Okay, that was our power whoosh, sending you positive
Excellent.
energy
Thank you.
from the
Thank
east
you.
side of the state.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much. It's been a pleasure to work with you guys this year and to chat with you, and always a pleasure, Karina. Thank you very
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, and congratulations again.
much. Thank you very much.
Some really wonderful things. All right, bye bye.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Take care.
You too.